A woman viciously attacked by two dogs.
There was blood smeared almost 3 feet high on the walls.
A groundbreaking case.
I mean, you just never knew what was going to come out next.
Massive canines bred for violence.
If a person can't control these two dangerous weapons, this is like a gun, it's like a bomb.
But are these dogs really to blame?
She didn't ask to be bred this way. She didn't ask to be owned by these people.
Or are their owners the culprits? January 26, 2001, San Francisco. At 4 p.m., Police Captain Henry Hunter receives a phone call from police dispatch.
They called me out to a crime scene in Pacific Heights. They informed me that a woman had been attacked by a dog.
Hunter heads to the address, a chic vintage apartment building located in San Francisco's elite Pacific Heights neighborhood. When Hunter steps off the elevator, he comes face to face with a horrifying scene.
There was blood smeared almost 3 feet high on the walls for a length of 20 to 30 feet. There was clothing torn and strewn about.
At the end of the hall, a female victim lays naked, covered in blood.
Every inch of clothes torn off her body except for one sock.
Emergency medical technicians arrive on the scene. They find 33-year-old Diane Whipple barely breathing and unable to speak. She is rushed to San Francisco General Hospital. Police follow the trail of blood that leads down the hall to the apartment door of 45-year-old Marjorie Knoller, the owner of the dogs responsible for the attack. She and her husband, Robert Noel, both criminal defense attorneys, live 2 apartments down from Diane Whipple with their 2 Presa Canarios, Bane, a male, and Hera, a female. After the attack, Knoller managed to get Bane into her apartment behind closed doors, but Hera was still loose in the hall when police arrived.
Animal control came up. They fired 3 tranquilizer darts into Bane in order to bring him down, and they also had to loop the dogs with the neck holders and bring him out. He was still very aggressive.
With both dogs under control, police look to the only witness for answers. At the scene, they take this picture of Marjorie Knoller, covered in the victim's blood.
Today is January 26th of 2001. I'm speaking with Marjorie Knoller.
That's correct.
Okay.
In an audio-taped interview with police, Knoller recounts what happened in the hallway. She says she was in front of her apartment door, having just returned from walking her 2 dogs. At the other end of the hallway, Diane Whipple was carrying a bag of groceries and opening her own door. Then, without warning, Hera began barking and set Bane off.
He turned his head and saw the woman at the end of the hallway and reacted to her negatively.
Knoller says she tried to hold the animal back with all her might, but lost control. The 120-pound dog charged straight for the 5'3", 110-pound Whipple.
Mrs. Knoller told us that Bane jumped up and put its paws on either side of her shoulders. The dog on its hind legs was about the same height as Whipple.
A neighbor heard Whipple's screams and called 911 immediately.
911, we have 2 dogs rampaging out in the hall.
The elderly woman who lived across the hallway said she could hear people screaming for help.
Please hurry. Don't dare open the door. These dogs are ferocious.
Knoller tells police that she tried everything to stop her dog from attacking, even throwing her own body on top of Whipple's in an effort to get between her and the dog.
Each time that she would move her body away from my body, he would remove his attack on her.
The attack went on for nearly 10 minutes. When it was over, Diane Whipple lay motionless in the hallway, bleeding, barely breathing, with over 70 bites on her body.
The police officers who arrived at the scene, they thought a monster was in the hallway. One of the dogs was still loose by itself with Diane in the hallway. No Marjorie Noller.
After securing Bane, Noller never returned to the hallway and did not call 911. At San Francisco General, Diane Whipple enters surgery, barely clinging to life. Police leave the scene that night, satisfied with Marjorie Noller's version of events.
When we talked to Mrs. Noller, she had told us that there had been no other incidents with the dogs, no prior, attacks or aggression on their part.
But less than 24 hours later, a flood of disturbing phone calls to police will cast serious doubt on her story. San Francisco, 33-year-old Diane Whipple is brutally attacked by her neighbor's dogs in the hallway of her apartment building. Doctors try to save Whipple. But later that night, after an extensive 2-hour surgery, she dies at San Francisco General Hospital. Her death alarms the community.
In a country of 300 million people with an estimated 40 to 60 million dogs, fatal dog attacks are just fantastically rare.
Mostly the people that get attacked by dogs are elderly people and young children.
This makes the case highly unusual because Diane Whipple was in the best shape of her life and had even completed a marathon less than a week prior to the attack. Whipple, an athletic coach, had recently started a Division I women's lacrosse program at nearby St. Mary's College.
Diane was a wonderful person. She truly had a passion for life. She had a passion for teaching young people.
The San Francisco news media quickly jumps on the story.
And during that time, there have been no complaints filed with animal control.
People familiar with the dogs and their owners, Robert Noel and Marjorie Noller, begin contacting police.
They started receiving phone calls about other incidents that had taken place with these dogs.
But none of these complaints had ever been reported until now. Many of those interviewed by police say Noller and Noel were less than friendly.
These were very nasty people, according to their neighbors, and very litigious people.
The kind of neighbors that people love to hate. And yet neighbors were afraid of them, and they didn't confront them.
Whipple herself had been bitten by these dogs before, but never reported it. Captain Hunter and his team begin to suspect this was more than just a freak accident. They wonder if these dog owners are responsible for Diane Whipple's death. Should they be charged with homicide? Police decide to take a closer look at the dogs involved in the attack. After animal control removed them from the building, Bane, the male, was immediately destroyed. Hera, the female, is kept alive for behavioral and physical tests as part of evidence should charges be brought against the dog's owners.
She was trembling, and anything at all that we did resulted in her growling at us or lunging at us.
I raised my arm, and she lunged toward my...
At a dangerous dog hearing on the case, Jean Donaldson, an animal behavioral specialist, is asked to testify and recommends that Hera be destroyed.
Although she committed this heinous act, she didn't ask to be bred this way. She didn't ask to be owned by these people. There was no other possible outcome here.
Hera is later euthanized by Animal Care and Control. Authorities begin to trace the history of these two dogs and how they came to be so violent. Marjorie Noller and Robert Noel are both criminal defense attorneys. Their main client base? Prison inmates.
They didn't really do a lot of local work. They were traveling up and down the state, representing inmates.
Authorities uncovered that the dog owners obtained Bane and Hera just 1 year earlier from one of their former clients, Paul Schneider, a 38-year-old convicted felon known as Cornfed. Schneider is a member of the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang and believed to be the leader of the group at the Pelican Bay State Prison in California, where he is serving a life sentence for attempted murder. The relationship between the two lawyers and their former client is somewhat unusual. They have recently adopted him as their son.
For whatever reason, they really took an affinity with him, and they would visit him in custody.
Authorities also learned that Schneider has been running an illegal operation from prison, raising and selling Presa Canarios as guard and attack dogs. He calls his business Dog of War.
Things like that are usually prohibited inside the prison. You can't just run a business out of the prison. And Marjorie Knoller and Robert Noel helped run this business.
Presa Canarios are a rare breed originally from the Canary Islands. These massive creatures are typically bred to be guard dogs.
Physically, they look very much like a mastiff. They are intended to not only look intimidating, but be intimidating.
Although these dogs may appear frightening, Presa Canario breeder Tom Rodriguez says their behavior is a direct result of the way they are bred and raised.
They're well-tempered dogs. If bred by, the right person, if the person's trying to encourage the dog to be aggressive, it'll end up being aggressive.
This raises an important legal question. Did Noel and Knoller know that their dogs were dangerous, even capable of killing? As rumors swirl of pending criminal charges, the couple immediately begins defending their pets and themselves to the public. In an impassioned 18-page letter faxed to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, Knoller and Noel point to other factors as cause for the deadly assault.
No, Bain had never shown any signs of people aggression.
The couple blames Whipple for provoking the attack by, among other claims, wearing a perfume containing pheromones.
They campaigned to show that it wasn't their fault, it was Diane Whipple's fault. And they reacted as if they were lawyers, instead of reacting as if they were humans.
Knoller claims in a nationally televised interview that Whipple had ample time to get away.
She was in her apartment. She could have just slammed the door shut. I would have.
Paula Fava Corcoran, the paramedic who treated Marjorie on the day of the attack, sees the couple on the evening news. Knoller told Paula a different story than the one she was telling now.
I asked Marjorie, did she, the victim, Diane Whipple, do anything to provoke this attack by the dogs? And Marjorie answered no, just a simple, quiet no.
No.
When Paula hears Marjorie's altered version of the events, she makes a call to the DA's office. After hearing this story and several others that seem to contradict Knoller's, Assistant DA Jim Hammer believes that she and her husband not only knew what their dogs were capable of, but were also aware of their aggression.
If a person can't control these two dangerous weapons, and she knows that 100%, and she's been told by people, hey, this could kill people, this is like a gun, it's like a bomb. I mean, there is no reason Diane Whipple shouldn't be alive today walking with us.
Hammer asks a grand jury to consider manslaughter charges for both Noel and Knoller. But what the jury comes back with surprises even the prosecution. March 2001. A San Francisco grand jury deliberates over charges against Robert Noel and Marjorie Knoller in the killing of 33-year-old Diane Whipple by their two dogs. The jury indicts the couple on charges of involuntary manslaughter.
That it would be best to adjourn.
And in an unprecedented turn of events, they request another verdict form for second-degree murder in the case against Marjorie Knoller.
There'd never been a murder case in the state of California involving a dog mauling.
It's not your typical case of you pulled the trigger, you planted the bomb. And we had to convince the jury that Marjorie Knoller herself was personally responsible for what these dogs did that day.
Because of the enormous publicity surrounding this case, the trial is moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles. February 19th, 2002, opening arguments begin. The prosecution's task, to prove this was an act of implied malice.
The implied malice is You do something so inherently dangerous to human life that can kill somebody, and you know about it. And she says, I just don't care, I'm gonna do whatever I wanna do. That's murder.
Hammer calls over 30 witnesses that testify to incidents in which Bain and Hera exhibited dangerous behavior in their owner's presence.
All of a sudden, I hear this god-awful snarling sound. I immediately looked up, and I see these two dogs coming at me.
And not just once or twice or five, but finally over 30 different incidents where these dogs had lunged at a small boy, at a pregnant woman's stomach. The defendant saw it happen, and they just didn't care.
The prosecution also outlines the couple's connection to the Aryan Brotherhood member that gave them the dogs.
They called it dog of war. That gives you a pretty good insight into what kind of dog they wanted. They intentionally sought to get aggressive dogs, guard dogs. How they had a book talking about how dogs could be as dangerous as a hand grenade or as a loaded weapon. And again, bragging about these incidents.
These dogs are fighting dogs, some of the most fearsome creatures known, bred to take down large animals.
These dogs first began living with a woman who started a pen pal relationship with Schneider while he was in prison. From his jail cell, he convinced her to raise his dogs for the operation. In time, she came to fear the animals and felt prisoner in her own home.
The dogs originated with this woman. She loved or wanted one of the inmates to love her, so she was in this situation where she was, captive of the dogs. She talked about how at one time one of the dogs would literally slam its body up to the side of her trailer while she was inside petrified, and that the dogs were attacking everything.
The woman couldn't afford to properly feed the dogs anymore. So Schneider entrusted his lawyers to take the two dogs in from their original home, one with a large yard, and raise them in their one-bedroom apartment in the city. Noel and Noller were glad to do it, even knowing the risks involved.
The vet up north who said, please don't bring them into a city. These dogs are wild, they're untrained. Other people said, put a muzzle on the dog. For the price of a muzzle, Diane Whipple's alive with us today. But you can't have warrior dogs, can you, if they wear muzzles? And they wanted warrior dogs.
Dr. Randall Lockwood, an expert on dog behavior, agrees. The dog's past is an indication of their aggressive actions.
They need to be told no from the time they're puppies. They need to know what they can and cannot be allowed to do, what they can and cannot show aggression to. And that is part of the early socialization and training. And in looking at the background of Bain and Hera, it was apparent even from their earliest history, these dogs were unmanageable, were killing livestock, were killing other family pets, and were uncontrollable even from their early puppyhood.
But defense attorney Nedra Ruiz and her team tell of a kinder, much gentler side of the dogs.
She had never been in a situation where both dogs were not being obedient.
They remind the jury that there had never been any incidents reported about these dogs. On March 11th, the defense calls their last witness, Marjorie Noller. For 3 days, Noller tells her version of what happened on the day Diane Whipple died. Noller's testimony covers a range of emotions as she recounts that she threw herself on top of Whipple to protect her.
It's like there were two Marjorie Nollers. There were times in which she would become very emotional, but when she was cross-examined by the prosecutor, she seemed very matter-of-fact about it.
In his closing argument, prosecutor Jim Hammer puts together the entire picture for the jury.
It wasn't just anyone, it was an Aryan Brotherhood member. It wasn't poodles or golden retrievers, it was these huge, potentially very violent dogs. When you put it all together, there's just no doubt about what they wanted. They wanted that feeling of power.
After 4 weeks of testimony, both sides rest their cases. Robert Noel never takes the stand. It's now up to a jury to decide, was this just a tragic accident, or is this dog owner responsible for murder. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returns with their verdict. Robert Noel and Marjorie Knoller are both found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And then,
we, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Marjorie Knoller, guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree in violation of Section 1.
It's been very hard.
Diane Whipple's family and friends are satisfied with the headline-making verdict. But 3 months later, the unlikely happens. Marjorie Knoller's second-degree murder conviction is overturned. The trial judge concludes that the state failed to prove that she knew her dogs would fatally attack her neighbor. The couple are both sentenced to 4 years in prison and are later released early on parole. One of the terms of their early release is that they cannot own dogs. As a result of this notorious case, the stereotype of the Presa Canario breed as killer dogs has been confirmed in the minds of many. But breeder Tom Rodriguez disagrees.
Presa Canarios are not actually just aggressive dogs by nature. Any breed, as well as the Presa Canarios, are most likely made to be that way.
Rodriguez says owners have the choice to teach their dogs how to behave.
We all play a big role in the outcome of the dog. The owner, the breeder, and the trainer.
In this case, you could perhaps characterize Bain and Hera as the victims of repeated acts of negligence. They were instruments of a crime. They were weapons, but they're also living things. And their victimization started probably from the moment they were born.
As a result of the Diane Whipple case, the California Penal Code now states that anyone knowingly having custody of a dangerous animal can be prosecuted, not just its owner.
You own a big animal, you own a big responsibility. If you can't control them, then you can't have the animal. It is a tragedy, but it's a tragedy that was easily preventable.